A $1 billion error at Indiana Medicaid. Holcomb on the legislative session. Plus, mayors want lawmakers to back off and more. From the television studios at WFYI, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending January 5th, 2024.
Indiana Week in Review is made possible by the supporters of Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.
This week, heading into the 2024 session, Indiana's Medicaid program will cost about $1 billion, that's billion with a B, more in the current state budget than previously expected. The state last month revealed an error in the estimates lawmakers used to write the 2023 state budget. The underestimate is centered largely on home and community-based long-term care services. State Medicaid leaders say the flow of up-to-date information wasn't good enough when they gave lawmakers the funding estimate in April. Those leaders pledged to make changes to their process. Republican Senator Ryan Mishler says an error like this can't happen again.
We probably need to take more of an internal role with them, and along with Medicaid oversight, and work together to make sure it doesn't happen again.
The state will dip into its budget reserves to make up the funding shortfall in the current budget, but Office of Management and Budget Director Chris Johnston says there are long-term conversations needed about the growth of the Medicaid program.
This amount of growth cannot continue, so there's going to be some tough decisions ahead.
Medicaid policies were under the microscope already this year in a Medicaid oversight committee created by the legislature. How does something like this happen? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Elise Shrock, Republican Mike O'Brien, Lindsey Erdody, editor for Axios Local, and Niki Kelly, editor-in-chief of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. I'm Indiana Public Broadcasting State House Bureau Chief Brandon Smith. Mike O'Brien, for those of us who've been around for a while, we never expect the estimates to be down to the penny, absolutely 100% that's what's going to happen. But $1 billion off?
Here's the thing, that's not a lot of money. So in the Medicaid, there's a reason, zoom out and think about maybe the last 10 months. What have we heard a lot from leadership? Heard a lot from Jeff Thompson, Ryan Mishler, Travis Holman, get people that are not traditionally speaking up on Medicaid. Rod Bray comes out of the last session saying, what keeps you up at night? Medicaid. And this is why. You can miss a little.
Like this miss, 2 or 3%, I think?
It's between 1.5 and 2. So put this in context. We always talk about the $41 billion state budget. K-12 education is a bigger part of it. That's not actually the case. That's true of state money. If you combine in a Medicaid program, state and federal money, we're going to spend $19.4 billion by estimate in 2024. We're going to spend $20.6 billion. It's going to go up $1.2 billion in 1 year. So that's why a guy like Chris Johnston is like, hey, we got to start paying attention to this. They bring back the Medicaid Oversight Committee, right? They put that away for a few years. They bring it back. Who's in charge? It's not Ed Charbonneau, the chairman of the Health Committee. It's Ryan Mishler, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, because they've got to, they're understanding we have to pivot because this program could swallow the budget. So forget about K-12 education only getting an extra $1 billion. Think about the Medicaid program missing by 5% on estimate because costs in healthcare rise so fast. And so, for those of us who pay close attention to how that program becomes more expensive, the state has control over the plan design of the Medicaid program beyond what the federal government requires. So every single session, there's legislation in the health committees that say we need to extend coverage to this population or to this type of service or to where this service is provided. And that's disconnected from the conversation on the fourth floor of the State House, which is the money conversation. And so what Senator Mishler is saying in this is we've got to connect these dots. We've got to connect these people that are making these decisions, that are driving these costs, or we're just going to have a story like this every year where the Medicaid program swallowed up another $1 billion.
Is this, in light of that, is this being set up for we are going to see significant cuts to who can be on Medicaid in the state of Indiana in the future?
Yeah, and I have concerns about that. I mean, we have the surplus. I mean, sure, considering it's not as big, but it's big enough to where we have to dip into our surplus.
It's like twice what this overage is. They spent that down considerably.
But our surplus isn't there to be dipped into for heirs, and I also hope that
certainly
this
not
doesn't
ongoing.
Not ongoing, and I hope that this doesn't throw a lot of cold water on some necessary conversations that need to be had about reimbursements. It is a huge
which
program.
is increased to 100%.
And because there is need. I mean, the need
Totally.
is there. It started with the pandemic, but that really just pulled back the curtain on an existing need, and we're seeing that just sustain. So yeah, this is going to continue to be a conversation. We're going to have to look closer. And again, that surplus money, we can't set a precedent that it's there for heirs. It's there for economic relief, right?
And this is part of a larger, I mean, healthcare costs in Indiana remain higher than a lot of other places in the country. This is part of that too, because if you shrink the Medicaid, if you shrink the number of people who can access Medicaid, they're either going to have to find radically more.
You can't, though.
Well, hold on, mister. There are other people at the table.
I know, but you can't do that.
But, well, I mean, some people they can't. They admitted that the area that this was biggest in was home and community-based care. You can't shrink it for a certain number of people. I mean, there are just some who are elderly and poor who have to have the coverage.
Right.
Now, do they need dentists? We are going to do a managed care situation they're trying to move into, but that would be a couple years before we see if we can save any money through that concept.
And the thought is that we will,
Yep.
but we're still a few years away from seeing the results of that. I want to talk a little bit about, again, going back to my first question, how does this happen? Which is what we heard, and they seemed very honest at the meeting. They were very forthright and listen, we screwed up and here's why this happened. But they didn't have up-to-date information, which they've said they'll improve. But the thing that strikes me is, you just pointed it out, the big underestimate was in home-based long-term care. Why did we not think that we would need a lot? I mean, the population is aging. We're moving towards more home-based care anyway. Why would they not assume that it was going to be bigger?
That's exactly my question, to be honest with you. It feels like we should have seen this coming, maybe not to that extent, but it feels like we could have. And so, I think we kind of heard Senator Mishler's upset about this, rightfully so, because the estimates should have been better. And I'm curious to see next time when they're writing the next budget, when we're getting estimates again, if they're a little bit more critical about the numbers they're receiving rather than just accepting the information they're getting.
I want to, before we move on, I want to ask you both about that idea, which is the great thing about the revenue forecast that Indiana lawmakers rely on is it is a consensus forecast. It's both parties and outside people coming together and all agreeing this is our best guess. And they know not to take it as absolute gospel. They always build in some wiggle room there because you never know quite what the economy is going to do. But lawmakers have a lot of confidence in that number. And we've thought the same thing about the Medicaid forecast. But when they write a new budget a year from now, are they going to have that same confidence?
I doubt it. I mean, but for the same reason, they're pivoting. The people involved in this conversation are changing. Like, it was the point I was trying to make. We're not just talking about how do we extend health care to vulnerable populations. We're talking about how do we pay for it and protect other things that service vulnerable populations within that program. And so they're going to have to sharpen the pencil on it and do what they're doing in long-term care, pivoting to managed care, and but those are going to be hard decisions. Those are going to be limitations on care, limitations where care can be provided, and those types of things, because there's a practical element to this. You can bust the budget on it.
I think this is also going to make them look at a culture of reversion, where there has been a huge emphasis on reverting money back to pad the surplus, and that was clearly a huge part of the air here. So I hope that that's also part of the conversation.
Or it's going to be hyper-reversion.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that could go that way.
Yeah, they're going to talk about it.
Yeah. All right, Governor Eric Holcomb says he hopes lawmakers leave contentious issues for another day as he heads into his final legislative session. Legislative leaders have promised a quieter session focused on smaller changes to existing policies. Holcomb says he understands holding off on anything drastic.
I hope the word would be constructive session that yields productivity.
Holcomb isn't revealing many details about his final legislative agenda, but he's talking a big game about it, promising to do things we've never done before.
And I think we'll have an unprecedented impact and effect on our state's future.
Holcomb plans to unveil his agenda on the same day the legislative session begins, January 8th. Elise Shrock, will lawmakers make a big impact in the 2024 session?
I'm sure they will. I think a lot of folks are waiting to see if that's a good impact or a bad impact. There are a lot of communities that have this legislature has taken pot shots at over the last couple of years, so they are bracing themselves. As you know, as I'm talking to folks in these various communities, they're waiting to see what happens. But I hope it's a good impact. One thing that I have been happy to see is a shift in mindset from Republicans. Democrats have been talking about childcare for a very long time. You know, reading the tea leaves, I feel like that's going to be part of some of the agendas that we're going to see again this year from Republicans, maybe even the governor. And I think there's a shift in mindset where they're seeing this as infrastructure, childcare as infrastructure. So I'm hoping that there will be a very substantive conversation about that. I'm hoping that in a campaign year, there will be some discipline shown by this legislature, but you know, those hopes, we'll see. We'll see.
We talked a little bit about this on a previous show, but just because they're trying to make small tweaks, as the legislative leaders have said, to existing initiatives and things like that, doesn't mean they can't have significant impacts on people in the near future, right?
Sure. Yeah, and I think we're going to see the House and Senate Republicans' agenda early next week. Hopefully, probably Monday, as bills are now starting to become public. Speaker's indicated he wants to target focused on reading comprehension in third grade, right? There's things you can do in a very targeted way. What we've seen in the last maybe 2 cycles, the short session has become a testing ground for the next long session. So you may put out a major issue that probably is not ready yet, but you want to see why it's not ready. Yeah. What kind of support do I have for a concept before you really zero in the details? So I think you're going to probably hear a lot of big conversations on larger ticket items, including education, and other things. But leadership has done all they can to temper expectations on making big moves on major policy.
And even the idea of like getting members used to an issue, because
Sure.
a lot of times a big reason why issues take multiple sessions to get through is lawmakers don't want to do something the first time they're exposed to it.
It's a process.
It should be. It should be, but it's not always.
Eric Holcomb saying he hopes lawmakers leave contentious issues for another day, which would be not when he is the governor anymore. Does that seem fairly pie in the sky to you?
A little bit. To Elise's point that it is an election year and lawmakers want to have something to brag about. They want to put it in ads. They want to go door to door and tell constituents what they did, some hot topic that their constituents are riled up about. Here's how they solved it. But I think we'll see, how much control does leadership have over their caucuses and what gets heard. You can file any bill you want, but does it get a committee hearing? Does it move to the floor? We'll see what happens.
We haven't really seen a controversial social issue take over a session in a little while. They have in the past, certainly RFRA being maybe the most extreme example of that. But I mean, last year, there was no shortage of contentious social issues, culture war issues, but we were also doing so many big policy-related things that didn't occupy all the oxygen in the room. But is there more of a chance because of what we talked about?
Yeah, that's the danger when you sort of do smaller tweaking, is that there's space left for these things to kind of blow up. I think it's fair. We're not going to have any bold or transformational change out of this session. We might see obviously some small tweaks and changes, but yeah, there is a possibility that something could sort of fester up from below and take up more attention because we're not distracted by stuff like redistricting or budgets or cutting taxes or, because all of those are off the table.
Yeah. All right, time now for viewer feedback. Each week we post an unscientific online poll question. This week's question is, do you expect the 2024 legislative session to be quiet and uncontroversial? A, yes, or B, no. Now, last year, we asked you who will win Indiana's 2024 U.S. Senate race. 49% of you said the Republican candidate, 50% of you said the Democratic candidate, and 1% said the Libertarian. If you'd like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. 2 outgoing Republican mayors say local officials need fewer restrictions from the state in running their municipalities. WFYU's Joe Wren reports.
Terre Haute Mayor Duke Bennett was defeated in November's general election by Democratic challenger Brandon Sackbun. Bennett visited the State House frequently, lobbying for state funding during his 4 terms as mayor.
If they would just give us more freedom to spend those dollars, locally, they approve our budgets anyway, so they know what we're spending it on, but to give us a little bit more local freedom.
He says sometimes all municipalities are hurt when laws are changed to deal with the problem somewhere else. Columbus Mayor Jim Lienhoop agrees.
I think that the legislature could back up a little bit and sort of reread the home rule statutes, that we are all adults down here.
Lienhoop is retiring from politics after serving 2 terms. Bennett was selected to lead the Indiana Office of Community and Rural Affairs.
Niki Kelly, this has been a debate for as long as the state has existed, I think. But does this message matter more right now when it is coming from Republicans?
Maybe a little. But yeah, this debate is above partisan politics, honestly. The whole idea of state control and local control definitely exceeds Republican-Democrat. It's the basic tenet of all the questions. Now, I will say one thing that is maybe a little different is we've seen in maybe the last 8 to 10 years more focus about completely nullifying things that Indianapolis does, but sometimes they do them in a way that affects all municipalities. And so that I would think might be the one little area that they should be paying attention to more. I realize the Indianapolis lawmakers, the Republican Indianapolis lawmakers, they see Democrats running the city in a way they don't like, and they say, oh, we have power to control it. But they have to remember that power is impacting more than Indianapolis.
Realistically, the debate will continue, and it is the problem that on some issues, the party in control, which obviously is currently Republicans, is like, oh no, local control is best, the government closest to the people is best. And on other issues, state control is best, we know what's best. Is that the problem, that it's not consistent?
Yeah, absolutely. it's local control is best until we disagree with what's happening locally. And to Niki's point, that's not necessarily partisan. Republicans disagree with each other all the time, and there could be something a Republican mayor's doing that a Republican state lawmaker doesn't like. And I think we have seen, especially, we've definitely seen Indianapolis be attacked at the State House repeatedly, and I think we'll see that again this year. But we've heard from Hamilton County mayors who are Republican have issues with this debate back and forth, and it hasn't really changed anything. So I don't know that 2 other Republicans, not really from the Indy area, saying something is going to make a huge difference.
We might see these play out in 2024 on a couple of different issues. Housing remains I hear a lot from folks at the state level and from builders who say the biggest impediment to housing is all of these local ordinances that restrict what we're allowed to build and where we're allowed to build it. And the state tried to incentivize them to get rid of some of those, but they haven't ordered them to do that. Mm-hmm. And so that remains a problem. We also hear from folks who acknowledge that we need to diversify our energy sources, going, these locals have to stop solar projects and wind projects from coming to their communities. Is that going, are those the issues that you see maybe this local control debate intensifying on in the near future?
There's always one-off where you don't like a thing a community is doing, to Niki's point, and so you intervene and it splashes across the entire state and every municipality. Those are 2 big examples, housing and energy development. There are different, there are creative ways local governments, even if a solar project or a wind project isn't actually coming into the boundaries of that community that they're trying to impact or cut it off or not let them connect to the grid, or there are unique ways that local government is trying to control development locally, even if it's outside the boundaries of the city. Whenever the legislature intervenes, it tends to be because a local unit, in their mind, overreached, and then the reaction is at the State House. And it's nonpartisan. I remember it wasn't long ago, the House Democrats intervened in a tiff between the Marion County Democratic Party and the mayor's office on the floor. I mean, it was wide open. It wasn't even in private. So that stuff that's just how it goes. I mean, this is nonpartisan. Whatever tier of government you're serving in, you're trying to step on the one below you, and you're mad the one above you is stepping on you.
But to Niki's point too, it feels like there's the overall debate on a host of different issues, and then Indianapolis, right?
Yeah, well, and there's always, to Mike's point, there's always going to be that tension, right? Where it's like, we need you to respect home rule, but also there are going to be times when we need the state to come in and help. So that tension is there. I think it's a precedent that this legislature has set with a lot of that Indianapolis-specific meddling. We've also seen, folks who say they're staunch conservative filing bills on libraries and school boards and very, very local issues. So, if it's gonna, I think mayors are looking at that thinking, they are right next to their people. They don't always have the political bandwidth to be as kind of unwieldy as the legislature is. They don't have that, protection of a supermajority to be as unwieldy. So I think mayors do look at the legislature and want them to respect their decisions.
All right. Governor Eric Holcomb says the sale of U.S. steel to a Japanese company reflects the need to remain competitive in a global marketplace. U.S. Steel has 3 facilities in Indiana, including its largest manufacturing plant, which is in Gary. Lawmakers at both the state and federal level expressed disappointment at the company's sale to Nippon Steel Corporation. Congressman Frank Mervan accused the Japanese company, which he says has a history of untrustworthy trade actions, of exploiting American workers. Governor Holcomb says the sale is a reminder that an isolationist perspective doesn't work.
You have to be able to compete on a global stage if you want to stay in business and grow.
Holcomb says he's still sifting through the finer details of what the sale will mean for contracts U.S. Steel has in place with the United Steelworkers Union. Lindsey, Erdody, quite frankly, should Hoosier workers be worried?
Well, we've heard from the union. They're clearly upset about the sale. They don't want it to happen. They're frustrated on a lot of different levels, even though the company has said that they would honor the existing contract, which I think goes till 2024, maybe 2025. But anytime there is a sale of a company to another company, people are always worried. And, there's lots of examples people can point to justify that of, bad things that have happened. I think it's a little too soon to tell. We don't know for sure yet. But, yeah, I think a little bit of worry is justified.
And I think some of the union's frustration here was also that there was the potential for a sale to another U.S. company, to Cleveland Cliffs. That obviously didn't happen because they apparently got a better offer from the Japanese company. Is that maybe some of what's driving it? It's not just a sale from one company to another, it's a sale from an American-based company to a non-American-based company.
Yeah, that's kind of life in this economy now, this global economy now. I get that they're worried, but they have to follow Indiana rules on stuff like occupational safety and things like that. And so I think it's natural for them to be worried, but I don't know that we should be worried anymore because it's a Japanese company.
Some of the reaction to this from lawmakers at the federal level was not just we're upset because unions are strong constituents of ours and we want to protect those jobs. That's obviously a big part of this. But some of it I also saw was a national security focus, that steel is about national security as much as anything else. Do you think that could interfere ultimately with this deal going through? And is that necessarily a good thing?
I'm not sure that it will interfere. I think kind of the positioning that we're seeing is because, to your point, Lindsey, the existing union contract till 24, 25, that's not that far away. So you need to position yourself to negotiate and to make sure that you're coming in with a strong stance so that people will meet you a little further. So that could be a little bit of some posturing there to make sure that those union jobs and contracts that are very important to that region of the state are strongly considered.
Well, finally, Indianapolis's Circle Center Mall may undergo a complete overhaul, with the developer recently agreeing to acquire it and gut the mall, turning it into a project that includes housing, offices, entertainment, and retail spaces. Elise? Is this good for Indianapolis?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have now is a large piece of downtown that isn't utilized to its fullest function. So to see that re-envisioned, reimagined in a way that's going to bring even more people downtown, I think is going to be great.
Well, where will so many state employees go to get lunch if they get rid of
right
the
now
mall?
they're going nowhere in Circle Center Mall. There's nowhere to eat anymore. Because it was a very nice way to characterize a Circle Center Mall that has been gutted since. I mean, they were struggling before COVID. So this is a transformational project for downtown. It's gonna,
as someone who works near downtown, is this exciting?
Oh, absolutely. I can't wait. I mean, it's just, malls are kind of out the way it was, so it's time to re-envision it.
It looks like a grand goal. Do you think it will fully come to realization?
Oh, we'll see what happens. This isn't the first time we've heard about a Circle Center Mall redevelopment project, so I'm cautiously optimistic.
the developers proven it, though.
That's true.
They did Modelworks, and which is getting national awards, and it was awesome.
That's true. All right, that's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel is Democrat Elise Shrock, Republican Mike O'Brien, Lindsey Erdody of Axios Local, and Niki Kelly of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at WFYI.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Brandon Smith of Indiana Public Broadcasting. Join us next time, because a lot can happen in an Indiana week.
The opinions expressed are solely those of the panelists. Indiana Week in Review is a WFYI production in association with Indiana's public broadcasting stations.